Okay, part two. Let's just listen to what Gordon says. This guy is the voice of reason.
I'm hanging in. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Okay. We don't need to give the numbers. We could just look at the price reaction here. You've been following this stock for a long time. Give us uh give us your short term and your long term take here on this earnings report.
Yeah, so I think the earnings report was in line with what we expected. I think it was weaker than what the street expected. There's three key things I'll highlight. There's a number of things we talk about, but number one, right? Tesla had on every previous earnings basically release talked about a 50% CAGR. They said they were going to grow 50% annually. They completely took that out of the most recent earnings slide. That's number one. Number two, they gave guidance of notably lower growth. So their growth in units last year was 37%. The street has them growing like 22% this year. They're saying notably lower than 37. So I think that's going to be below the 20% the street has them growing this year. And then they said a number of times they said their gross margins effectively are going to go lower from Q4. So they said the benefits of gross margins are going to be worse going forward. So it looks like their margins have peaked, whereas a lot of people are saying the margins have dropped. A couple of other things. They said their tax rate is now going to be 25%, whereas in the third quarter it was 8.17%. And in the fourth quarter, we can get into this, they had a $5.7 billion tax benefit. We could talk about that, but it reached the high heavens in our view. And then lastly, they talked about this next gen model, but they said it's not coming until the end of 2025. So you're talking about 2 years with no new models, stale models, low volume production. And they said they're going to produce that $25,000 car in Texas, right? They were supposed to produce that in Mexico. We know they delayed their Mexican facility indefinitely. Then they said they were going to do China. There were a number of other countries that were rumored. Why is it important they're doing it in Texas? Here's why it's important. Texas is a high cost production market. You're talking about paying your factory workers in Texas roughly $50 an hour versus $10 an hour in Mexico, $5 an hour in China. There's no way, in our view, that car is going to be competitive if they make it in Texas. So them saying that suggests to us they're not ramping any more new facilities. So I think overall this is quite bad near term because you're talking about street numbers that are too high. And I think it's very bad long term because this is a stock valued at 100 times our 2024 EPS estimate that we think earnings growth is going to be negative. That's absurd. So I think that's the setup.
Gordon, what about the consumer? Let's just look and just take a look at, the overall consumer, because I've argued for a while, maybe this isn't even just going to be a Tesla problem. I mean, we've had higher interest rates. Does this not impact the consumer's ability to buy new cars? Like, I mean, Ford, GM, and obviously you don't cover those stocks, but, they've backed off on EV production here. Is there a case that the U.S. consumer just may have less money in 2024 to buy new cars?
Well, no, that's something Elon Musk is saying to try to kind of shield himself
Okay.
from weak demand for Tesla's cars specifically. Demand for ICE cars is still strong. Demand for cars that people want are still strong. Look, the reason why people are exiting the EV space is simple. It's because they're not profitable. Think about this. Tesla's net margin in Q4 was 7.9%. They just told you their tax rate is going from 8% to 25%, and they've already done a price cut in Q1 of 2024 equivalent to 5%. So they're now a profit. They're again now a profitless EV manufacturer. That's why Ford, GM, VW, Toyota, and the battery manufacturers, Panasonic, LG, CATL. That's why they're pulling back billions of dollars they plan to invest in EVs because it's just not profitable. So I think that the reason why Tesla has problems is because the consumer just doesn't like and doesn't want to buy EVs. That's the real issue here. And I know I'm the only guy who says that, so it's hard to grasp. But you can see the guys who know this market see the market much better than any of us, me included. The auto manufacturers and the battery manufacturers are pulling back hundreds of billions of dollars in investment. So the proof is in the pudding, if you will.
Gordon, one more for you. What I'm looking at on Twitter here this morning, and I'm seeing a lot of talk about it. Even though the cars obviously not selling quite as much as maybe what the numbers weren't as good. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about these humanoids. Seeing a lot of people talk that what, Tesla's not just a car company; it's a technology company, and they have these humanoids coming that they're eventually going to sell and make a lot of money with. Some people saying it's going to be the most valuable company in the world because of the humanoids. Where are they in this production? And how far are they from being able to actually sell these things?
So 2 years ago, you would have told me the same thing, but you would have said Cybertruck. 4 years ago, you would have told me the same thing, but you would have said FSD. 6 years ago, you would have told me the same thing, but you would have said the Tesla Semi. Listen, this is our opinion, but this is a pump and dump scheme at this point. They have all these products. Where's the ventilators? Where's the semi truck that actually we have specs on? Where's the $40,000 Cybertruck? Where's the $25,000 car? Where's the factory that makes the factory? I mean, Elon Musk comes up with a lot of these products that are years out, and then he doesn't execute on them. It's not like he promises and delivers late. He just doesn't deliver at all. Where's the 100,000 solar panels or whatever he said? The fake solar panels he showed to sell Solar City. We never saw those. There's always this carrot that he puts out there. With respect to humanoids, Boston Analytics,
Dynamics,
I'm sorry, has been at this for decades, right? And the video that Elon Musk just showed, we now know it was a complete fake. There was a guy controlling it to the right of the video. Where are they at with humanoids? I don't think it's ever coming, but it's a way for people like, Morgan Stanley and Cathie Wood to put a valuation not justified by any reality. Think about this, right? Think about this. For years, Elon Musk has said the Dojo computer teaches their cars to drive themselves. They have millions of miles of data, right? In fact, in September of last year, Morgan Stanley, Adam Jonas did a 60-page note where he took his price target, I think, from 250 to 400, and gave Dojo a $500 billion valuation, right? Dojo is not mentioned in any 10Q or K of Tesla. And last night, Elon Musk said it's, quote, a long shot. So he's been basically selling this to people for years. And last night, he effectively almost completely discounted it out of the Tesla story. You got to look at these things, right? You got to look at these promises he's made. And the fact that my peers on Wall Street, highly respected firms, are giving this company hundreds of billions of dollars of valuation for this vaporware. It's crazy. We believe it's analytical malpractice. And I think that the results this year are going to prove that this company has big problems.
Let's move on to another sector. You just mentioned the Solar City takeover. I can remember that a long time ago. But let's since we're on kind of like the bearish theme here, talk to us about the solar sector here. Is there any recovery, short term or long term, for the solar sector?
Yeah. So look, I just want to remind you guys, you can make money shorting stocks too, right? You can short stocks and make money. It seems like shorting is like the plague these days. Last year we had a big call short solar, and it worked out fantastic. It was a fantastic short. It was probably one of the best shorts in the stock market. The problem with solar is simple. We put out a note this morning highlighting this. China is reaching grid constraints. China is roughly 50% of global solar demand. Last year, China grew 40%. The expectation is China is not going to grow at all this year. Given the overcapacity in the solar space, if China doesn't grow, you're going to see a further collapse in prices, and that is not factored in. So I think the parts makers, the Jinko Solars, the Canadian Solars, the Solar Edges of the world, I think are going to see tremendously more downside. I think an incremental downside this year. So I think those shorts are going to work out quite well. And then moving to the Sunruns and the Sunnovas and the SunPowers of the world, these aren't really solar companies. They're effectively specialty finance companies. I call them subprime solar roofers. The problem is if interest rates go up, which clearly they are, and they have been, these companies are facing basically extinction. SunPower has already defaulted on one of their warehouse facilities. They're close to being forced into bankruptcy. And I think Sunrun and Sunnova aren't far behind. The problem is their loans don't generate cash. So I think there's two distinct plays in the solar space. You want to play the supply-demand story on the parts makers to the downside, and you want to play the interest rate story and the potential bankruptcy story on the resi rooftop side.
All right, Gordon. So say you wanted to play the kind of clean tech trade long. Are there any sectors within clean tech that you do like?
We love uranium. We've liked it for a while. I think we were one of the first. I think we initiated on Cameco around, I think, like $13. I think the stock's just under 60. It may be 60 now. It's a very simple story. Everybody wants to go net zero. With intermittent peak load power like solar and wind, you can't do that. You need distributed base load. And the only way to do that is nuclear. And globally, governments are moving towards nuclear now. And when you add to that, you have these financial players like Sprott who have come in and brought up all the excess spot supply. You're talking about a powder keg under prices. Clearly, prices have went a lot higher. We're talking about $100 U308 per pound right now. But you could see another stair step higher in those prices. And if that happens, that will be reflected in the stocks. We think there's tremendous upside in these stocks. We think there's going to be a move out of solar, out of EVs, into uranium at some point. So you're going to get that euphoria play, we believe, as well. We would be very aggressively buying Cameco at this point.
Yeah, and we saw, when the Russia-Ukraine war started and Europe was having all these energy problems, France was actually in a better position than a lot of other countries because it did have more nuclear and it is building more. Do you think we can see that in the United States at some point in the next 10, 15 years? It seems like our leaders here in the United States are so against this type of clean energy.
That's a great question and a great point. You look at Diablo Canyon out in California. They were supposed to decommission that. They didn't. You're talking about a lot of talk and support around small modular nuclear reactors in the U.S. The U.S. is clearly moving back towards nuclear, as are other countries. And you're talking about, for instance, people are expecting a lot of incremental supply from NextEra. But the question is that mine real? I think nobody's looked into that. We've started to. So I think the U.S. has to move that way, because if you want to move towards net zero, but you want reliable power that is cost effective and works, you got to do nuclear. Solar and wind just don't work. And you see that with respect to Hawaii having to move completely away from solar because they did too much rooftop. It constrained their grid. And California effectively doing the same with the NEM 3.0 rules. So I think the U.S. has to move that way. It's not a factor of if, it's a factor of when. And I think the when is now. And you're also having other countries move back to nuclear. So we like the space. And I think that once, it becomes more popularized, you have, people like me talking about it, more people, I think you're going to have that euphoric trade in the uranium space as well.
We've been on the line with Gordon Johnson. He runs GLJ Research, joining us here on Benzinga's Pre-Market Prep. Gordon, thanks for coming on, and we'll be dialing you up again real soon. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah. So you see, this guy knows what he's talking about. Well, let's look at. But before we go, right? I want to look at the ratings. Okay. So this is some screwed up website, purely advertising nonsense, right? He gets less 0.25 of a star of a rating. The guy that does analytics, the guy that looks at the balance sheets, the guy that looks at economic frameworks, like what's the direction, how well is performing, like stuff like so we're trying to basically, wind and solar, renewable energy, right? Because I want to find out that as well. Is that actually a viable solution? And I, in my head, like maybe 5 years ago, I was like, okay, but why don't we go nuclear? because I worked in this company basically, ESB International, as an intern. It was like long time ago. Very, 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 very long time ago. ESB International. This company here, yeah. It's basically Irish utility company. And it was so long, it was like 2 decades ago probably. I was like high school level back then, right? And they were already doing electric vehicles. I'm talking like electric vehicles, electric grid, renewable energy. And this was like 2 decades ago. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's still not out. And you're talking about the company, like, it's huge. I mean, it's massive. Let's see. Electric Supply Board, yeah. Look, 8,000 employees. And I mean, you have guys in there, like, I went to, like, because I was doing, like, delivering stuff sometimes. Because I had to bring some marketing material to guys. And these guys had PhDs and were, like, in charge of the entire chamber of engineers for Ireland. I spoke to those guys and I realized, holy smokes, those guys are so smart. And, like, they work, like, all the time. You come in the morning, they're sitting there, and I was like a hyper performer. Well, not in the company, but I'm talking about I'm like long hour type of guy. And they're just grinding all the time in there. And they can't do it. Do you know what I'm saying? They're struggling to make it efficient. And some dude is gonna tell you that he's going to do it. But this shit is it's so hilarious to me. Like, it's just, and look, he has 5 rating. Look, I listed the list of things that he has promised. And exactly like Gordon, I'm struggling to understand how people are like, oh, the 25,000, oh, the humanoid robot is coming. The humanoid, what is it? The solar panels are coming. The Neuralink is coming, and the like I don't understand to date how can people say that full self-driving is going to somehow work, right? Now they're facing lawsuits. They had 2 million vehicles recalled in America because the fully safe driving does not work. Mercedes has level 3 self-driving already, which they legally take responsibility for, and somehow this is 5 stars. Do you understand? Like, the problem I'm having with the internet when I'm looking at this shit, I'm like, dude, like, it has to be, it's basically kids, that's it. Like, all of those ratings are designed to, because kids are like, oh, but they're like, oh, the Elon Musk is so, he's the next Iron Man. Because they can't understand Gordon Johnson. Well, the Gordon Johnson is going to tell you, oh, look at their asset ratio, for example. Because asset ratio is asset liabilities ratio. You can, well, hold on one sec. Yeah, so asset test is basically, it's like you calculate their short-term assets, because when you look at the balance sheet, there's short-term, there's long-term assets, right? Something short-term is like a bank, right? Or creditors, because you can liquidate them very quickly. So you can cover your liabilities very, very quickly. So if some bank knocks on your door and says, hello, gentlemen, we need you to repay the loan because the conditions have changed, you can liquidate your short-term assets and repay that loan very quickly. That's one of the kind of ratios that analysts look at. Like, there's asset tests, there's liquid tests, there are all those, like... But how the hell do you explain that to a 5-year-old who has 20 IQ? I mean, it's impossible. Of course you're gonna be like, oh, look, Elon Musk is like, oh, he's gonna give you candy if you buy his stock. And that's it, like, that's how it works. So, like, the internet for me is just like, at this stage in my head, it's just becoming the nightclub that I don't go to. Right? That's it. I'm actually thinking of just creating a channel. Well, not the channel, but like a... well, not... Just, what's the name? Because you have Google main account, and then you have brand accounts. Well, basically a branch account of YouTube for myself, where I only have specific channels that I just visit every once in a while, because... But I mean, honestly, kind of the... I already do that anyway. With this extension, this one here. Newsfeed eradicate. My problem is that, you see, I have a lot of subscriptions, so I'm trying to basically just get rid of all this junk and just have maybe like Gordon Johnson, Chris Norlund, Thundertooth, CoffeeZilla in here, you know? So I don't have to kind of scroll and be tempted by some of... because some content I'm still not sold on, you know? But there's some good stuff, like, I mean, this guy is amazing. Okay, so he said, I just wanted to check this, Cameco nuclear, so he's saying uranium, right? Uranium is what they use to power up the nuclear reactors, right? Uranium. Yeah, and another thing he didn't factor in is that petrol is running out. So you have to go nuclear. I mean, what's the option? If you have no petrol, what's the next best thing? Is uranium. You have no other way to do it. Well, you're gonna go coal? You can't go coal. Because then the global warming is gonna be like tomorrow if you go full coal. So the next best thing is you have to go uranium, right? There is literally no other option. Because wind and solar is not working. Well, I mean, it's working in some countries, but not in humongous countries. Like, I mean, you can't probably go wind and solar in China. It's just not gonna work. Because the population is so big. It's gonna work, like, it works really well in Ireland, because we're tiny population, tiny island, lots of wind, lots of space where to put, because, I mean, you have to remember, like, Ireland is huge as a country. Like, if you take Ireland by square meters and compare it to any Asian country by square meters, they have that triple the population per square meter, right? So there is a lot of... One of the problems with kind of the... When I was working in ESB was that a lot of those renewable solutions like water, hydro plants, for example, they are very, very, very space inefficient. Because, for example, if you want to generate, let's say, 1,000 watts of power, the amount of space required to do that with the renewable energy is massive. Like, we're talking huge. Whereas with nuclear power, it's like very, very easy. With petrol, it's very, very easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of space. But with wind farms, I mean, it's huge. So your energy, like kilowatt per square meter, is just huge. Well, it's small. I'm talking about like in nuclear, oil, and gas, it's big. But in relative terms, in the renewables, it's just tiny. So that's one of the problems. And you just, with growing population, that's another concern. You just don't have the space to do it. Plus also the cost of production, I mean, it's like it takes a long time. That's why you see like a lot of them are subsidized by the government, because they're not viable for a private company to go into, because once you buy, you need to wait like 10 years before they become profitable, and that's assuming that you don't have any major breakdowns, which is not the case. So I can see his logic for uranium, actually. Let me just see. So he said Cameco is the company he was talking about. Cameco, okay. Yeah, so the trend has gone back. What I would do is maybe, because all of those companies, they rely on, is there like a uranium index fund? Uranium index fund, let's see. Global uranium, okay. Uranium ETF, okay. Now, I'm not advising you to buy this stuff, right? Because like I'm just like kind of dipping my toe into the water, I suppose, but because I wouldn't go for something like this myself, because you have to do a lot of research on this type of stuff, you know. Okay, so it peaked 125. Okay. Yeah, so you see it reflects the Cameco stock. So by country, I suppose. Let me just real quick. Okay, so Australia, Kazakhstan. Oh. Oh man, Australia are... That's very, very good. Because they are allies, you know. It would be sad if it would be in like some Saudi Arabia or something like this, because not only do they have oil, they also have all the uranium. That's gonna be really messed up, and that country needs to, you know, get their its human development index up, because right now it's it doesn't look very good, you know. They're a little bit behind the Western countries. Kazakhstan, oh shit, Russia. Well, if Russia presidency changes, then it's gonna be okay. Because historically, Russia was kind of a okay country. Not like super bad, but not like super good either. You know, they were kind of like, it depends on who's in power. Kazakhstan also actually has a lot of petrol as well. Like, people think Kazakhstan is a poor country, but they're actually they have a, what's the capital of Kazakhstan? It's like very, very wealthy. Capital of Kazakhstan. Wait. Almaty, I think. Almaty. Yeah, this capital. Because there was like a, I don't know, I watched some dude, he was doing some kind of blog, visiting cool places. And he visited this place and he was like, holy moly, it's so wealthy, like this place. And he thought he's gonna see like, you know, kind of like a third world country style country, but he was like, oh my god, it's so wealthy, this country. That's because of oil reserves. I mean, they have massive oil reserves. But where is Almaty? It's in here, I think. And their GDP per person in that country, in this region, is same as in Ireland. So that region has the same standard, well, like standards of living as Ireland. So. But I mean, look at how huge this place is. Holy moly, Kazakhstan. Oh, uranium, he's saying. Huh. Anyway, like this video is technically just to back up what Gordon Johnson's saying, because I know, you know, like somebody's gonna remove it because it doesn't make look like 400, 500 views. I mean, anyway, okay, take care, bye bye.